All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's Time and Power. So I'm sure many of you guys have seen the recent interview with Phil Heath that came out about a day ago on Generation Iron's YouTube channel. So it was actually a very good interview, or I guess I should say a very interesting interview. There were a lot of interesting points that Phil Heath brought up. So I'm kind of going to give you guys the cliff notes in this video if you don't want to watch a whole half an hour video. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is the main topic of discussion for this particular portion of the interview really seemed to focus heavily on Phil's midsection. So one of the things that I thought was interesting that Phil said here was he said that the photographers at the Olympia, the bodybuilding photographers, it's unprofessional of them to publish photos of Phil Heath where he looks bad, to publish photos of Phil Heath in between poses, to publish photos of Phil Heath where he's breathing heavily or not necessarily hitting a mandatory pose. But one of the things that Phil said that I don't really agree with is he said they only do that to him. He said that they only take unflattering photos of Phil Heath. So that's just not the case. For example, if you go to teamandro.com, they did have some unflattering photos of Phil Heath. But if you look, there's photos of all the guys in between poses. Here's Lucas Osledil right here. Really not a flattering shot of him. And this is the case with many of the guys. I mean, basically what these photographers do is they get up there and just let the camera bang. They hold down the shutter and take as many pictures as possible. So yes, some of the photos are going to have transitions. If you go over to Big Ramy, here's some photos of Big Ramy that aren't very flattering in between poses. A picture of him shaking his quad but not quite flexing it. Not really a good look for Ramy. And then, of course, here's just a photo of Ramy not even posing, just holding up his hand just in between poses. So for every bodybuilder, I mean, I'm seeing like 3 or 4 shots that are not mandatory poses and are kind of, just an in-between pose for that bodybuilder. And with Phil Heath, I think he was specifically referring to Team Andro because Team Andro had these 2 photos. So it's really only 2 photos on Team Andro's page where Phil doesn't really look the best. So in these 2 photos, obviously, he's just getting done with his routine. He's kind of raising his arms, and the midsection looks kind of weird. But again, if you look back at all the other bodybuilders, Team Andro had these same couple shots, if not more. Like in Big Ramy's case, there was 4 shots in between poses. Phil Heath only had these 2 that were really unflattering. And Phil kind of made it seem like it was like a conspiracy against him. They only released these pictures of Phil Heath. So I just wanted to clarify that. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think these photographers have any bias. I don't think these photographers are unprofessional for publishing photos of transitions. They're trying to give you guys maximum coverage of the event, not just the mandatory poses, but everything in between. They want to give you guys a full picture of what's going on here and publish everything that they can get in their camera lens without, shooting a video. And to be fair, this same website, Team Andro, had some very good shots of Phil Heath, some very flattering shots. I think this photo of Phil Heath's front double bicep here was one of the most flattering pictures of Phil Heath's front double bicep. And that was, one of their first pictures in this album, or in this gallery, I should say. And then the other point that Phil Heath made in this interview that was kind of a weird point, I'm not really sure where he was going with this, but he was saying that the photographers use a different lens on him when he comes out than on the other guys. Kind of like it was a conspiracy to make him look bad, which I don't really understand at all. And I actually have an extensive background in photography. I've been, really into photography since I was maybe 12 years old, maybe 11 years old. I've had maybe 6 different DSLR cameras. And I've got to say, I really don't know what he was talking about because that really makes no sense at all to me that the photographers would use a different lens to take a picture of Phil Heath. So to give you guys some context here, when you're using a lens on a DSLR camera, the main goal is to zoom. So whatever subject you're taking a picture of, you want a lens that's going to best capture that subject based on how far away they are. So for the individual routines, each and every guy was the same distance away. I don't really see any reason why a photographer would use one lens for one competitor and another lens for another, because the only purpose here is really to zoom in on the competitor. So if all the competitors are coming out one at a time to the same distance away, the same lighting circumstances, you know what lens you're using for every single competitor. It's going to be the same lens, and there's no reason to change it from one competitor to another because the competitors aren't getting further away. Now, the only reason I would see to change a lens would be when they go away from the individual routine and go to the comparisons. When you got to fit 5 or 6 guys in the photo, you might want a wider angle lens to capture that, and not so much a lens that zooms. And that's the only scenario I would see where a photographer would change a lens during a bodybuilding competition. It just makes no sense to me, that where that argument came from. I don't really believe for a second that Phil Heath comes out on stage and all the photographers are like, okay, it's time to put on our, our shitty lens to make Phil look bad. I just don't think that's the case at all. And then the other thing that Phil talked about when he was addressing his midsection was he said, why is this what people keep focusing on? Why are people making this a narrative about my midsection? Why aren't they talking about how good my back was, how good my calves are, how good my conditioning was? Why weren't they talking about the good points of my physique, and why do they have to put a negative spin on it? And I wanted to answer Phil's question in this video. So let me ask you guys something. When a 7-time Mr. Olympia is defeated and loses his title, what is the number one question every bodybuilding fan has on their mind? It's, why did the champ lose? And I think it's safe to say that most of us feel like the reason that Phil lost, 7-time Mr. Olympia, lost the Olympia for the first time, the reason we feel was his midsection. So that's why we made videos about his midsection. That's why we didn't make videos talking about how good Phil is, because that goes without saying. Phil has won 7 Mr. Olympias, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, hands down. But when Phil Heath is defeated, the question isn't, how great is Phil Heath? The question is, why did Phil lose? And that's what we are answering. We're not trying to spin some narrative and make it negative about Phil. That's what people want to see. That's what people want to hear, is why did you lose? They don't want to hear, well, Phil lost, but his back looked great, because that doesn't answer the question of why did you lose. And the final thing that he addresses in the interview is bodybuilding bloggers, which I'm assuming would include myself. He's saying that what we do is selfish, and we don't have the best interest of the sport of bodybuilding in mind when we make these videos. Number one, I want to say that's false. I made bodybuilding videos for 5 years and got nothing in return for it. I'm a massive fan of bodybuilding. I love promoting it. I love talking about it. And I love giving people a place where they can talk about it and view other people's opinions. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the irony of someone whose career is a pro bodybuilder to call someone else's career a selfish career. I think pro bodybuilding is arguably the most selfish sport, if you want to call it a sport, that's out there. It's entirely individual. You sacrifice massive amounts of time away from your family and friends, spend all the time working on your own physique, building your own body, going to the gym, doing certain things and putting certain things in your body that put your health at risk, which I would say is a pretty selfish pursuit. So the point there is not to bash bodybuilders. The point there is to say, everybody that has a job and everything that we do, every one of us has a little bit of selfish motivation for why we do what we do. I think anybody who shows up to work is going to work for the paycheck, for themselves. I think most people that go to work are not going to work because they just love giving and they love working. I think most people are going there for that paycheck. Now me, I happen to love bodybuilding. I happen to love promoting it. I happen to love talking about it. I happen to love interacting with other people that love bodybuilding. I love to promote bodybuilding. I just happen to also get paid for it. I just happen to have a job that I really enjoy doing. So if that makes me selfish, then I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep doing this job because I love it. So that wraps up the video for today, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.